Abundi bashmaya, neskadashmak, tefe malkusak, nehwe sevyanak, aikandi bashmaya afbara.
The Gospels tell us he was buried in a tomb. And 2 days later, Mary Magdalene, one of his closest disciples, found the tomb empty.
The things we believe and the things that are myths, and like the worshiping Mary and those sorts of things. So,
faith isn't a typical element that people are dealing with in.
When you think of Jonathan Roumie, you probably picture the compassionate, powerful portrayal of Jesus from The Chosen. But recently, Roumie made headlines after giving his thoughts on a documentary that questions one of the most foundational beliefs in Christianity, the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Some are calling it a faith crisis. Others see it as a moment of deeper reflection. In this video, we'll uncover what the actor really said, explore the shocking claims behind the so-called lost tomb of Christ, even as Roumie tries to answer the deeper question: can bones in a box really shake the faith of millions?
And though the gospel calls it a lie, it was rumored that Jesus' disciples secretly took their master's body, presumably to give him a permanent burial.
In casting films and TV shows, it's like people are more, I think in Hollywood especially, people are kind of nervous about talking about their faith in a business setting. I never was. I was just, I'm happy to talk about it, to anyone who wants to talk to me about it. But, getting that kind of advice was a little strange and disappointing, but I also wasn't surprised because that's kind of what I had heard about him.
During a relaxed fan panel, someone asked Jonathan Roumie what he thought about all the archaeological debates surrounding Jesus' life. With a calm smile and just a touch of humor, he responded, "People are chasing bones, but I'm following the one who walked out of the tomb." That one sentence lit up social media. Some fans were clapping virtually, saying it was the perfect reminder to keep faith over facts. Others, especially those following biblical archaeology, began to raise their eyebrows.
My career, and I just said, "Lord, you tell me where you want me to go, and if somebody wants to cast me in something beyond Jesus when The Chosen is done, great. If not, great. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it does. I would love to work, of course, but I trust God, and everything He does, He's going to show me where He wants me to be and the roles He wants me to play, and hopefully there'll be some interesting stuff outside of that kind of box, and but I'll whatever He does, whatever He wants.
Was Jonathan brushing aside important evidence? Was he throwing subtle shade at the so-called lost tomb of Jesus theory?
I think it can be easy to take the cross, the image of the cross, for granted because we're so used to seeing it. And if we look at the cross and we can see everything that Jesus suffered on that cross, even though on the cross He's painted very cleanly, you rarely see crucifixes that actually show the level of torture that Jesus went through. It can be a constant contemplative reminder of how we are to be with each other, because He did that for all of us.
If you watch closely, Jonathan wasn't mocking anyone. He wasn't trying to discredit scholars or researchers. His words were more of a gentle nudge, like saying, "Hey, don't get so caught up in digging through graves that you forget about the living Christ." It is a very personal expression of belief, not a debate.
React and how you look at the majority of the work that is put out in the secular world, and faith isn't a typical element that people are dealing with in a film or a TV show, unless it's very specific to the show's storyline. I think the fact that I've surrendered any notion of, what kind of control.
Still, his remarks stirred up an old and controversial question. What is this lost tomb theory? Why has it been such a big deal? And what's the real story behind it? Let's take a closer look, shall we?
On the Sunday morning, under pressure from contractors, a team of archaeologists was called in to excavate. They had only 3 days before the tomb was to be sealed and cemented over.
I could see this large slope with tractors and bulldozers and trucks trundling in different directions, and right in the center of this slope was this gaping hole, which turned out to be the entrance to the Talpiot tomb.
Above the entrance was a unique facade, a carefully crafted chevron and circle that mystified the archaeologists.
There's no doubt about it that
in 1980, a group of construction workers was digging in a suburb of Jerusalem called Talpiot. They were preparing to lay the foundation for a new building when they stumbled upon something unexpected, an ancient tomb carved into the limestone. Inside were 10 limestone boxes called ossuaries, which were used in ancient Jewish burial practices to hold the bones of the dead.
there's no doubt about it that those symbols which are on the facades of the Talpiot tomb meant something. It's unlikely that the person or the family that came to carve out the tomb just carved these things at random. They had to symbolize something. What they symbolize, I don't know. But it's quite rare to find that kind of ornamentation on a simple tomb.
Shimon Gibson, a young surveyor at the time, was one of the first inside. It was his job to record the layout.
It was great. It was very exciting. Me entering into the tomb, which is being cut into rock. It has a center.
That would have just been another find in Jerusalem, until archaeologists noticed the names scratched onto the boxes: Jesus, son of Joseph, Mary, and Judas, son of Jesus. Immediately, speculation began. Could this be the Jesus? The one Christians believe rose from the dead?
It was incredibly important to get as much archaeological detail as possible onto plans.
Gibson's detailed plan recorded every inch of the tomb's interior. Extending out from a large inner chamber were 6 deep cavities called loculi, or kohim in Hebrew. And inside these kohim, the archaeologists found 10 small limestone coffins, also called ossuaries. The ossuaries were quickly transferred to Jerusalem's Rockefeller Museum under the direction of the Israel Department.
Fast forward to 2007. That's when director James Cameron, yes, the same guy who made Titanic, and journalist Simcha Jakubowski released a documentary called The Lost Tomb of Jesus. They claimed this Talpiot tomb was not just any family tomb, but Jesus Christ's own resting place.
When he's first buried, it's in a temporary tomb. And later, unless he somehow magically disappears and goes to heaven, which is a position of Christian faith, but if you're going to be historical and realistic, he would be put in a permanent place of burial as a good Jew. Okay? Well, the tomb, you have to have a family tomb.
The family tomb of Jesus. If the ossuary found in the Talpiot tomb.
The documentary laid out its case using DNA tests on the remains, historical analysis, and even mathematical statistics. They argued the odds of those specific names showing up together in one tomb were incredibly low, suggesting it was more than coincidence.
As you can see, the script is very simple. The Hebrew letters that create this name are Mem. Mem is for M. Reish, like R. Yud can be I or Y. And Hey in Hebrew, it's like H in Latin, English. That makes Maria.
Maria.
And it's one of the rare examples of that name on ossuary in Israel.
Maria, Mary, found in the same family tomb as Jesus, son of Joseph. Could this be the Virgin Mary's ossuary?
But here's where it hit hard. If Jesus' bones were really found, then what does that say about the resurrection? About Easter? About the empty tomb? The response was explosive. News channels couldn't get enough of it. Churches issued statements. Scholars scrambled to weigh in. Some were skeptical. Others were genuinely shaken. Suddenly, a discovery from nearly 30 years earlier was back in the spotlight, and it was challenging one of Christianity's most sacred beliefs.
Of earthly things, and you do not believe. How can I tell you heavenly things? I believe your words. This Messiah you speak of, I am he. The first one was named Ramin.
Thank you for this opportunity. I watched the Chosen series on Netflix, and it really reignited my faith and my love for Jesus.
That's the story Jonathan Roumie was alluding to. And for many people, it opened a floodgate of questions. But how solid is this theory, really?
First question. I saw in your previous interviews that you considered portraying Jesus in the Chosen series as a ministry and calling. What advice or insights can you give to Filipino Christians on how they can embrace their ministry and calling in spite of the challenges and distractions that we have today?
Well, I think anytime you endeavor to serve Christ, you're going to be presented with resistance and obstacles that will want to prevent you from doing that.
When the Lost Tomb documentary came out, it wasn't just another news story for Christians, it felt personal. For many believers, the idea that Jesus' bones could still be in a box somewhere was deeply unsettling. It shook something at the core. People asked themselves, if this is true, what does it mean for Easter? What about the cross? What about salvation?
Yeah, and I think that what you find in class is that if they admit the tomb was empty, they come up with reasons. They've got to come up with reasons. I mean, if they're not going to say that Jesus actually rose from the dead and appeared to the disciples, then why was the tomb empty? All right? One of the popular ones is they stole the body of Jesus. What's wrong with that?
Well, the simple problem is people knew where Jesus was buried, and so there have been people who've tried to propound the theory, well, he just was thrown off to the side like everybody else. But then the empty tomb argument doesn't make any sense in the population of Jerusalem in which it was originally made.
Churches began fielding tough questions. Bible study groups turned into emotional conversations about doubt and belief. Some people quietly wrestled with thoughts they were too afraid to say out loud. Others became angry, feeling like their sacred story was being turned into a science experiment.
Jesus obviously went through a burial of some kind. They would have known where the location was. All they would have needed to have done is to go to that location and find the body. The claim that it was stolen has to get over the hurdle of the guards. It has to deal with who stole it and where did they take it and why would they do it. If it was the disciples who stole the body, that doesn't make sense because they die for something that, well, we stole the body. We're going to die for stealing the body and claiming that we didn't. That doesn't work. So there's just lots of problems with the idea that the body was stolen.
All right, you've been on all of these ABC, NBC, CBS specials on Jesus, and not too long ago we did the Talpiot.
Prominent pastors and theologians stepped in. Some wrote articles. Others gave sermons. They reminded people that Christianity isn't built on bones. It's built on a resurrection. And that resurrection wasn't just symbolic. It was real, physical, and life-changing. Many saw the whole thing as part of a bigger pattern, an attempt by the secular world to explain away miracles, to reduce faith to cold, testable facts, as if the only way to believe in something is to have it under a microscope.
Any name like Daniel or something else, it just doesn't fit.
On 3 ossuaries, 4 names had been uncovered: Joseph, Jesus, Mary, and Matthew. And then on an ossuary found deep within the tomb, another name was discovered.
This inscription says Yosa, with a hey in the end, It's a diminutive of Yosef. There is no question about it. As an ossuary inscription, this would probably be quite unusual.
Still, the emotional impact was real. Some believers felt doubt creeping in. Others felt confused, like they were standing at a crossroads between faith and evidence. It wasn't just about archaeology, it was about everything they'd built their lives on. And yet, for many, that crisis became a turning point. A moment to ask, do I believe because of what I can prove, or because of who I've encountered? For those who chose the latter, their faith didn't shrink. If anything, it deepened.
And so, I think if you know that going in, you'll be already ahead of the game. Things won't take you by surprise. If you go into the ministry of serving other people, in Jesus' name, expecting that resistance and challenges, you'll know how to, you'll see them coming, and so you'll know that if you do have to go through them and you can't kind of work around them, you know that you have an ally and you have God with you, and that He will get you through anything that seems insurmountable in the moment.
Not everyone bought into the lost tomb theory. In fact, many experts pushed back, and hard. Dr. Amos Kloner, the Israeli archaeologist who first examined the Talpiot tomb back in 1980, made it clear this wasn't the tomb of Jesus of Nazareth. He said the names on the ossuaries, like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, were incredibly common in first-century Jewish culture. It was like opening a modern grave and finding names like John, Mary, and David. Interesting? Sure. But proof? Not even close. One of the biggest problems scholars pointed out was that the Bible says Jesus was buried in a borrowed tomb, one that didn't belong to his family. According to the Gospels, it was the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy follower who stepped in after the crucifixion. That alone made the idea of a family tomb in Jerusalem seem unlikely.
Amazing is not the word for it.
Can this stone coffin be linked to Jesus of Nazareth? To answer that question, we have to examine all the archaeological evidence uncovered in this family tomb. Does it fit with Christian tradition? Does it challenge certain articles of faith?
If the bones of Jesus were to be found in an ossuary in Jerusalem tomorrow, and without doubt, let's say they are definitely agreed to be the bones of Jesus, would that destroy Christian faith? It certainly would not destroy my Christian faith. I leave what happens to bodies up.
More than anything, theologians stressed the spiritual foundation of Christianity, the resurrection. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 14, the Apostle Paul puts it bluntly, if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. That verse isn't just a line, it's the heartbeat of the entire Christian message.
That is a huge part of it, and I think just staying deeply in prayer, staying extremely close to Christ through deep, deep prayer, that's how you get through all of that.
I felt like I'm seeing Jesus right now. Anyway, is it a challenge? I'm just curious. Is it a challenge or a burden to you, showing or expressing your emotions in your everyday life? How do you live out Christ-likeness in your everyday life?
No, I don't think it is. I'm pretty open with my emotions,
So while science tries to examine what's left in a tomb, faith clings to what's not there. An empty space, a stone rolled away, a risen Savior who appeared, not as bones in a box, but alive to his followers. Most scholars agreed. The Talpiot tomb may be real, but it doesn't rewrite the gospel. Because Christianity doesn't stand on limestone boxes. It stands on resurrection hope.
Just infinite love, compassion, and mercy. So that's kind of where I have to start, and otherwise, it's just a very kind of pale representation of who I understand him to be. So yeah, I mean, it's starts with my own life and trying to make room for as much of the Spirit to work through me, and then as a person, my interactions with everybody that I
Looking back on Jonathan Roumie's simple statement, people are chasing bones, but I'm following the one who walked out of the tomb. It carries even more weight now.
very kind of pale representation of who I understand him to be. So yeah, I mean, it starts with my own life and trying to make room for as much of the Spirit to work through me, and then as a person, my interactions with everybody that I meet on set. And
he wasn't trying to argue science. He wasn't debating archaeologists. He was doing what he always does, pointing people toward Jesus, not as an idea, not as a theory, but as someone alive and personal.
And I think it's important for me to maintain an openness, an emotional openness, and not just to conversations with people, but to experiences that I go through in my own life, because ultimately it's that openness which allows me to have access to this well to tap into when I'm performing, when I'm working, whether it's as Jesus or it's as any other secular character that has an emotional scene.
Roumie has said in many interviews that his goal in portraying Jesus isn't to play a character. It's to help people meet him, to feel his love, to experience his compassion. And for millions of people who've watched The Chosen, that's exactly what's happened. And really, how do you measure that? How do you put life change in a box?
That's actually the phrase that I use to people, like when I kind of this was something that just was sort of put on my heart to do, and I was kind of like, really, God, I'm going to pray divine mercy? Yeah.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, but people will know.
Yes.
I'll be really, really outing myself as a Catholic. And he's like, yeah, just do it. It's okay. So I started praying it, and it was scary at first, and then it became much easier, and I did that for about 40 days up until Divine Mercy.
You could talk about names on stone. You can study bones and run DNA. But none of that explains why people who are hopeless now have peace, or why addicts are set free, or why someone watching a show on their couch ends up weeping and praying for the first time in years. That's the Jesus Jonathan is following. Not buried, not boxed, alive. And that's the Jesus still showing up, even now.
Have that emotional accessibility within a character. You have to have that in your own life. That's part of my own training as an actor. It's if you can't express, or if you can't experience something in your own life, you're going to have trouble experiencing it through a character's life. So you have to be willing to go through any sort of emotional obstacle course as a person in order to effectively portray a character that has similar kinds of challenges.
Do you have your favorite Bible verse that can be a message to Filipino people, especially this Christmas season?
Oh, there's a lot. The one that comes to mind is, "Come to me, all you who are..."
Let's be honest. Questions like this can be uncomfortable. Faith isn't always easy. Doubt knocks on the door. And when headlines claim, Jesus bones found, it's natural to pause and wonder. But here's the thing. God is not afraid of your questions. He's bigger than your doubts.
Happened to time out to be 40 days, which ended on Divine Mercy Sunday. And because I haven't premeditated any of that. And the prayer, the daily prayer, was minimally just a commitment to praying the chaplet and maybe a couple of other litanies, and that was it. And then everything else that came on a daily basis was just inspired, because whenever I tried to plan, it wouldn't go well. So I just kind of let the Spirit sort of lead me in the direction that I felt he wanted me to go, and
Christianity has never been about having all the answers. It's about holding on to the one who does. The resurrection isn't just a story from 2,000 years ago. It's a living hope today. It's what tells us that death isn't the end. That love wins. That Jesus didn't just leave a teaching behind. He left an empty tomb.
People, and it had a wonderful response. I had so many people that were non-Catholics that were learning about Catholicism in a way that they hadn't heard, and just very matter-of-factly, very not dogmatically or theologically, but still incorporating elements of theology and really just breaking down the stereotypes of what it means to be Catholic, and the things we believe and the things that are myths, and like the worshiping Mary and those sorts of things.
So whether or not the Talpiot tomb is real, it doesn't silence the truth that has echoed for centuries. He is not here. He is risen. Like Jonathan Roumie, we don't follow bones in a box. We follow a Savior who still speaks, still heals, still saves.
3 brief citations. What happened to Yosei is a mystery. But if the ossuaries from the Talpiot tomb belong to the Jesus family, then Yosei has finally been found. Of all the ossuary inscriptions ever discovered, there is only one with this unique spelling of the nickname Yosei.
Look, clear as day, it's Josie. And that's an incredible thing, because according to Jewish law, if someone has a nickname, you have to put their nickname on their tombstone or casket. And it's the nickname that appears here right next to Jesus, son of...
And now, you get to decide what's more real to you, bones that might belong to anyone, or the risen Christ who's changed everything. Because in the end, tombs are just places. But Jesus is a person, and he's still alive. Was this video insightful? And will you make of the lost tombs of Jesus? Do drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.